Welcome to BenKyo's study group class number 36. Small. BenKyo's 15-point rule. So yeah, before we actually get into like these game examples, we're going to talk about what this 15-point rule is. And so let me just remind you guys that we do have a few videos on this general subject. We have videos, classes 16 and 31, which are endgame and move value calculation classes. We have class number 25, which is somewhat related. It's the monkey jump workshop. And we've got class number 35, which is big moves in middle game and early endgame. So you can find all those videos in the same section of the class content channel. And let's do a quick little review of a few examples of some big endgame moves. And I might be able to use this board as a kind of a sandbox. Actually, I'm just going to set something up here, which I tried to have it in the first file that we made, but OGS didn't like that. So I'm playing out the moves instead of using the edit tool because that one seems to cause problems. But yeah, so let's see here. Make a territory there, and then start on this one. Okay, I'm just gonna use the edit tool now. This branch is its own thing, so that should be fine. Let's just go like this. Okay. I think that's about all I needed. Yeah, so we're just going to use this little sandbox here as an example for some very quick review. So in fact, let me set up one more, which will be just a first line. Yeah, it's going to be our easiest example. In fact, I'll even make it like this. Okay, so we're going to start on the left side. So how big is this move at A5? Yeah, we're not going to spend too long on this point value stuff, at least for like calculating it, but we're just doing a little warm up. Okay, what else do you guys think? We have 2-point gote. Anyone else? And just remember that whatever number you say, like 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, you need to be able to point to those intersections that got affected. So it's going to be 2 points in gote. So if you imagine the two sides going straight down, you can see that black has, let's say we count on the B line, right? Then there's 5 here. And let me actually just make this territory here a little bit smaller so that, yeah. And let me see. Yeah, okay, actually, let me just edit this. Kill that. Get rid of that. Okay, I'm just going to save us some time for counting. So we're looking at this move, right? So compared to going straight down, which white would have 6 points and black would have 5 here. Actually, let's make them both 5. That's going to be the clearest example, right? Yes. And I better make sure white's alive at least. Okay, so we'll start the example from here. So we're looking at this move, right? Or for black, this move. So this brings white down to 4 points and it brings black up to 5 if we count on the B line. So 4 versus 5. And if white plays first, then black is down to 4 and white has 5. So basically the affected intersections, right, are going to be this one and this one. Black can reduce white by 1 and prevent themselves getting reduced, or the opposite. So 1 point on each side. 1 plus 1 is 2. Yeah. Okay, now let's move to a tougher example. So how about black A? This is a much more complicated one, but if you've watched the previous classes, then you'd have some ability here. You might even remember the value from memorizing it. Yep, so how big is black? And actually, let's just get rid of this whole garbage branch now. Oh, actually, no, we need we need those. But let's get rid of this one. Yeah, so Gote, so basically a move might be Sente at the moment it's played, but as long as your opponent responds, if you have to fix in response to that response and then take Gote, then it's Gote. So it's not about whether the first move in the sequence is a Sente move. It's about whether you finish with Sente or Gote. Yeah. Yep. So this black A, how big is this? And yeah, Gote means that once you finish doing it, if you do it in Gote, then your opponent has the initiative. So one way you can try to figure this out is if you just imagine white playing A and getting their first line follow-ups, and then black also playing A and doing the same thing, then basically how many intersections get affected in each way, right? So if black plays A, how many points does white lose compared to white playing A? And if white plays A, then how many points does black lose compared to black playing A? I'll give you guys a few more seconds to throw out some answers. Yeah, so it's gonna be 6 points. So black plays here, white, locally speaking, needs to block, and then black would have these moves. And it looks like it's 4 already, which would be you would also imagine white playing first, and so it would be another 4, so it would be 8. But it's not actually 4 here in this version of like black playing first, because later on, after black tenukis, white does have 1 forcing move here. So actually black just gained 1 and white lost 2. And if you consider that if white played the diagonal second line move first, then black, it's a mirror in this case, so black would have lost 2 and white would have gained 1. So if we play that out, that's going to look like black pass, and then white plays here, and these moves happen. And maybe black puts it here or here, but we'll just put it here. So in this scenario, black is also going to get the forcing move at R7 to make white fill up S6. So it's going to be, yeah, 1 point gained here and 2 points reduced here. So it's 3 just like the other way. So it's 3 plus 3, which is 6. And it is double Sente in this case, yeah. Meaning that this move is finishing in Sente for white. And also for black, it would have been the same. So it's a double Sente spot. So the theoretical value of it is 24. So it doesn't actually change the score by 24 points, but it has that urgency level. But you still have to use your common sense for your game. Because whether it's global Sente still depends on, for example, if white plays here, this might be Sente locally, but it doesn't mean it's Sente globally. So, you know, it may have the theoretical multiplied, you know, times 4 value of 24 points, 6 times 4. But if black can play somewhere that's worth a whole bunch, let's just say like 18 points or something, then probably the 18 points so black gets somewhere is bigger than like this jump or this monkey jump. So yeah, you have to use your common sense still. Now let's take a look at one more. Let's take a look at black A. Now there is this descend, but this descend just turns into this first line. So if you know this first line, Hane, which in this case is going to be 4 points double sente, because it's going to affect these two intersections and also these two. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So if you know that, then you know this, right? This is the same as this move because it leads to this move. But let's take a look at the hane. So how big do you guys think the hane is for each side? I'll let you guys actually try this one. Now that you've seen the example and have a little bit of a warm-up. So black playing A or white playing K2, what's the total difference? And again, you have to factor the first line follow-ups as well. And yeah, in previous classes, we did talk about this idea of a package, which is kind of like this. And this will give you guys a little bit of an extra nudge in the right direction. So after this, black might be getting gote here, right? But if all the follow-ups waiting for black later are like guaranteed local sente, then since black will finish all these with the initiative, it's as though black already got all those sort of when they finished in gote here. So out of all of it, they only take gote once, right? So it's one big package. It's just that some of this has to wait a bit for like at least one turn before it happens. So it's like latent value, right? It's like latent gains. It's like you invest in something and then, or, you know, you do some work, but then you still have to wait for your paycheck. Yeah, so how big do we think this hane is? Okay, 12. Anyone else? And don't worry if some of you cannot keep up with this, because there's a few classes already that you can review. And like we go into a lot of detail and, you know, take a while on certain parts. So I'm sure you can figure it out if you watch those past classes. But even in this class, like when I go over this one and explain it, you know, that might take you most of the way there. So I'm just going to go ahead then. And this is not double sente though, Kedar, because after white blocks and black connects, white has sente. So black lost sente. Yeah, Fedren, we're pretty much, we're counting the number of intersections that could have stones filled up into them. So you're also counting any points gained as well, not just prevented and not just reduced. But by looking at both versions of history where white plays first or black plays first, in the end, you kind of can just check which ones get filled up. Yeah. So is it because of Agi that we play K2 instead of K1? It sort of depends, right? Like K1 or wait, K2 versus K1. Oh, do you mean this? There's just no reason to play this. In this particular scenario, because black is so solid, you're not really going to suffer much of a consequence here, except for the fact that there's two consequences, even though it's not too bad. One is that if white is here, then white's follow-up is going to be guaranteed sente now, whereas it wouldn't be guaranteed if your shape wasn't like that. Number two is that there's a co-threat here, like this or like this. But also, depending on what's going on here, this can be very dangerous for black to do, because black can get peeped, for example, and it can be bad for example, let's say you have a small shape here that is like just barely alive, right? Sometimes white A, the peep, is how white kills the entire group. You just shouldn't play fancy stuff when there's no reason to. So solid connect is better. A mistake I still continue to see a lot that people do is going down, which is the only time going down is ever good is one, if the life and death requires the extra 1 point of eye space, or two, if the forcing move you give to white is worth 0 points, such as in the corner sometimes. But here we can see that this M1 is worth more than 0 for white, right? In fact, it's worth a lot, because if black would just patiently play here, black would have gotten all of this. Boom, 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 boom. That's a lot of reduction, right? So this move here, this descend, is double sente because it would go like this. Or if white played first, then it would go the same. And whoever plays first also finishes in sente. But we're not looking at that, right? We're looking at the hane. So if white does respond, then you're already reduced and expanded yourself, so you're happy and you just move on, right? And the whole point of us calculating the value of moves is to compare to other moves so that we know what's the consequence of playing this move, right? Like, let's say there's a 10-point move somewhere else. Then is that good for us or bad for us that we're playing this move instead, right? And the truth is that this is worth 14 points. 14 points, assuming that there is no clamp here going to work, which in some shapes it would work. So it's 14, assuming this move. And why is it 14? Well, up to here, you can see that compared to both of these sides going straight down, that's not straight, hold on. Compared to both of these sides going straight down, you can see that white lost these 6, right? You can also see that black gained 1 point at K1. You see that? So that's 7, right? 6 plus 1. If you do the mirror, you're going to see that here, and then black plays away, and then white does all this. Black cannot play here, right? Because of double Atari, which you learned during your DDK days from experience. So here. So we can see that this time, compared to white losing these 6, white saved them and actually got 1 more point at L1, just like what black got before, right? So it's going to be 7 plus 7, which is 14. And keep in mind, again, that it's only 1 gote ever that black takes here, okay? That's what I mean by a package, right? All of the moves of reduction that you see, including all the prevention that gets you to, it's 1 instance of getting gote, of losing sente, right? So that's why just by playing here 1 move, you get 14 points. Does that make sense? So 14 points is a lot, because imagine that you're not really that good at this stuff, and you're like the typical player, even a fairly strong SDK player sometimes, right? And instead you play something like here to reduce black's area, right? Or let's say that you're black, and suppose you play here, right? Something like this. You play here because you're thinking, oh, that's, you know, a huge chunk of points, right? And that's because to the untrained eye, these kinds of edge moves look like they're worth only 2 points or something. They look visually tiny, right? But you need to flip that perception, because it's actually this place that is tiny. And we're going to move on soon to the whole 15-point rule thing, but this is really, really important background for that, as well as frame of reference, which we're going to talk about. And for this example, of course, we are assuming that that there's like nothing else on the board to think about, because of course that would require more setup for this example. But for this example, let's just only compare like here versus here, because I want to show you middle versus edge. So here, there's a few problems with this move. The first problem is even points alone, it's only about half as big. It's 8 points, right? But this one is 14, right? And I've already proven to you that this is 14. We can also see that here, this can't possibly be worth more than 8 or 9 points, right? It just can't be, because look, there's no space for more intersections. You can argue that it gives you potential for 1 more point here and like 2 more points here. But even then, right, the most we could possibly argue would then be half the value of this and this. So that would be 3 divided by 2, which is 1.5, which is 8 plus 1.5, which is 9.5, right? So it's basically somewhere between 8 to 10 points at most to play this move, right? Even the 9.5, we had to assume black gets this one and this one and this one, which is not realistic. So therefore it's around 8 points. So you can say it's like slightly better. Like if you have another move that is worth exactly 8, like for sure 8, right? Then you should choose maybe this one, because at least this one has some follow-ups of like a little bit with these moves. So those follow-ups wouldn't be as big if this stone at C or at A here wasn't there, right? So you could argue that it's bigger than 8, but you can also say that if there's 10 points somewhere, you should probably just take the 10 because it's guaranteed, right? Even the 9, I would probably choose the 9 over this move. And here's another factor, okay, to help you. Look, this is a place where both players have territory, right? So both territories get affected, but this is a place where only one person can make points. Unless you're talking about like 1 point here, 1 point here. But only black has a moyo, like a little mini moyo here, right? In the center. So keep that in mind as well. For example, when white goes in to reduce, white's not gaining any points. They're only reducing, right? But if white plays here, this is gaining and reducing at the same time, right? It's kind of like if there's a move here, right? This move is gaining and also reducing at the same time. And even has follow-ups too, right? Like we talked about how this diagonal, like the one over here that we looked at earlier, this is locally a 6-point double sente. It's a huge move still. And after white played R14, they have this possibility of also getting that one. So, you know, not to mention the potential this way. But yeah, so that's a little bit of a warm-up for the move value calculations. So the 15-point rule, BenKyo's 15-point rule. So what is the value, first of all, of knowing the point values of our moves, right? I mean, I told you already that they let us compare moves and put them in the right order, and therefore figure out what the consequence is of playing in a certain place. And if you think about it, like Go is about having more points than your opponent. So we have the responsibility to know what we're doing when it comes to taking points, right? Like if you had a professional Go player and they don't know how many points most of their moves are taking, then like how could you be a professional at taking points when you don't know how many points you're taking, right? So when you think about it, like we have hundreds of moves in some games, right? Or at least over 100 to over 200 per game. And if you think about it, most of us are just playing moves that look kind of big, or for whatever reason, we're playing stones down. And most of the time we have no idea how many points changed between black and white each time we play a move, right? Don't you think that's a problem? Because imagine if you had a good idea, at least for second, first, and third line moves. Imagine if you had a good idea of how many points each exchange is changing the score by, right? And then imagine for the majority of players who don't study this stuff, if you have a better sense of this than them, and you're playing the people who think that, you know, something here is worth like 2 points or 3 points or something, which sometimes is even Dan players, by the way, in my experience. But imagine that for like 150 moves or more, you know, you're going to be gaining, at least for all the moves that are like about points. So maybe even if it's just like 50, 60 moves we're talking about, right? Or 80 moves, because some of the moves are just fighting, right? Now, even during fights, it's really important though, because there's all these exchanges we make here and there because we're so desperate to focus on like making 2 eyes, attacking a group, yada, yada. But along the way, we don't realize how many points we're losing or gaining with some of the exchanges we're making. Let me give you a quick example. Suppose that somebody has some sort of black group trying to live somewhere. Like I'll just set up something here. And I'll just make it, let's see here. Yeah. And then we'll put a black territory over here. So just forget about the way that how the board looks really strange, right? Because yeah, but imagine you're trying to live with this black, right? So if you could just like what about this exchange? I see this kind of exchange a lot, and then white blocks, and often like black doesn't even save the stone. They might just switch to here, or let's move black stone maybe here, right? So in this kind of scenario, you might not save this because you might still be worried about white going here. Or even let's change the stones a bit. Let's make it so it's like this. So imagine you're trying to live with this black group, And you know, so maybe you make that exchange, but then you realize, okay, if I play here, white can just go here and maybe my group is dead, right? Like this, and then like here, and then this is just a dead shape unless black pulls something off over there, right? But regardless, black probably switches to something like this, right? Here, here, big enough eye space. But then what of this exchange, right? Because this exchange actually gave white a stone at J18. Now there is this stuff like monkey jump on the other side. So it's like this sibling quarrel between like the two black territories. They're like family members, right? Or brothers or sisters, and they're fighting against each other now because the thing is, this exchange to give white a stone at J18, it hurts that territory. So you need to be aware of every little, like, for strong players, you know, or like players above a certain level, no matter how much fighting is going on, and what the overall current objective is, there's always like a second kind of parallel processing going on mentally about points with every single exchange, like not in sequences, but in moves. So like, let's say white's attacking this right side black over here. So then white's going to be thinking, okay, like if I, let's say I want to peep here, right? But if black responds like this, how many points am I losing and gaining, right? Or I play here to focus on the edge, but then black gets to jump all the way out here. Like, you know, how much center potential am I losing versus like the edge points? So there's all these things, and they're not just focusing on survive, or, you know, make this moyo at all costs. Like what I see a lot in some of the games I was flipping through to find examples, which we're going to look at some real game examples. What I notice a lot of is that people will push along, or maybe like their stone got cut, so they start Atariing along and pushing along to build moyo somewhere, but they're giving away territory in exchange too. And, you know, things happen, but then they keep doing the same thing again and again. And it's like, we get this plan in our minds, but we don't adjust it and we don't think about what the net profit is. So the net profit, by the time you get gote, you relinquish sente, right? You give control back to your opponent. Net profit is like how much did you gain versus how much did you give, right? And there's not enough thought going on about that. And so this is going to tie in with the 15-point rule too, which is that it's not just like your move before endgame needs to be, at least according to you, like to seem like it's more than 15 points, or at least 15 points, but its net profit has to be. You can't just look at what you get, right? If you take 15 but you give 10, then you're only getting 5. And 5 is like absolutely an endgame value. It's not anything good for a middle game. So always, you know, subtract what you give to your opponent. Okay, so yeah, so like players around 5 den plus are always extremely sensitive to points, and there's nothing stopping you from becoming sensitive to them as you know, 10Q, 5Q, 15Q. And it's just going to give you a huge leg up, honestly, like because most players in pretty much all the Q levels, even the stronger Q levels, most players have a very big weakness in endgame, but basically because everybody doesn't study it, then everybody just loses a lot of points and doesn't play optimally. But if you, yeah, I've talked about this a lot, but like it's quite low hanging fruit. Like if you study this, it doesn't take that long to get a lot better at it and to understand it and to get some memorized examples of some big moves. And once you have a few examples of big moves and why they're big, you'll be able to find and invent other ones because they'll be similar, like second line with a lot of follow-ups, or, you know, you'll have this way of thinking that you don't even need to be exact anymore. And you can at least have a good guess of which moves are like at least 6 or at least 8 or probably 10 plus, right? And that, which brings me to the next point, which is frame of reference, okay? So, because not all moves in Go have a clearly countable point value for us, right? So it's easier when it's on the first, second, sometimes the third line. But what about in the center or What about like connecting some stones or playing an attacking chasing move or something like that? Like, how do you evaluate these, right? So the frame of reference, which is going to be a basic understanding of point values and a basic knowledge of some of those moves. For example, knowing that this one is locally 6 points before you factor multipliers, which is like whether it's sente or double sente or reverse sente, which is a gote that is anti-sente. Right? Or like this one, or which is Hane and Connect in general has a minimum value of 6 in general. So, you know, if we make the follow-ups worse by putting some stones inside, something like this, then it's going to go down to 6 because after this, black has no sort of privilege moves, no sentes left. So you just assume that both go straight down because this would be a gote move, 2-point gote. And so that means black has no guarantee of it because it's only gote. Sente is like you get it for free, right? You do it and then you get your turn back. So it's like a guarantee, but not gote. So there's no reason to assume that black gets this because white could also get this, right? Therefore, you go straight down. So we haven't affected the intersections by that much. It's going to be around like 3 here and 3 here, which M1 could become a point for white if white played or sorry, I should say L1 could become a point for white if white played the Hane first. So the second line Hane and Connect is usually either 6, 8, 10, 12, or 14 points, depending on follow-ups of each side. For example, let's take away the white stone, right? But we'll keep the black H2 there. So in this case, like although when white plays Hane and Connect, white does not have any interesting follow-up except for a 2-point gote. But if black plays Hane and Connect, then after white tenukis, black still has very interesting follow-up to reduce a whole bunch in sente, right? So this one I can already tell you is going to be 10 points. It's going to be, basically it's like the 14-point one, but there's 4 points on this side that are not going to be affected anymore. Or actually, I should say, well, we can count this ourselves, really. So let's just do that. So we see that black gained 1 and reduced by 6. So that gives us the 7. And then if white played, so let's make white play first. Yeah. So basically, black loses these 2 plus the 1 that they were going to gain at K1 when they played L2. So it's 3 plus 7, which is 10, right? And at this point, I can just say what number it's going to be before I even count it because of just this rule. For example, what if we don't put the white stone here, but we put it here? This time, black does have sente follow-up, except that white doesn't have to back off like this, right? White can do this. But the difference between this move and the case where it is only 2-point gote is that after this, it's actually not gote because white has to fix this, right? So instead of 2-point gote, it's 3-point sente. So 1, 2, 3 intersections affected. And because of the additional move white had to play, it's sente for black. So so that's going to be 2 points worse than the 14-point, than the case where you made white reduce 2 more here. But 2 points better than the one where you don't have any sente follow-up, and then white just goes kind of straight down, right? So, like for example, if we take off H2, so if we start from, if we go like this, right, and then we put a stone here, and then we have black playing the, whoops, hold on, the Hane and Connect. Compared to the 14-point case, which we know is like this, the black side is still going to be the same. So that's like the 7. But white is going to lose 2 points less this time on their own side. Therefore, 14 minus 2 is 12. And if we give black the same benefit by putting a stone, let's say here, instead of here, which makes the follow-ups for white especially, you know, uninteresting, we put it here. Now it's going to be 10. because white still has this reduction here, which reduces black by 2 points less than the 14.1. And for same, and then for black, so like if I put a white here and a black here, right? Then it's going to be basically 2 different on this side and 2 different on this side. So from 14, it's going to be 4 less, it's going to be 10, right? So if we pick this stone up, it's going to be 12. If we pick this stone up, it's going to be 14. If we, depending on which place we put this, it's going to go down all the way to 10. So this one brings it to 12. This one brings it to 10. So 14, 12, 8, sorry, 8, and then 6. So you see what I mean, right? It's all depending on the follow-ups. So 6 points means nobody has any sente after, no matter who plays the Hane first, right? So we're not gonna go any farther than that on this because we have previous classes for that. But I wanted you to just understand how that all works. It's all about follow-ups, particularly the sente follow-ups, and you can memorize. So when you have these memorized moves, as well as just a general sense of like which moves should be big based on your experience and kind of what you can see, especially we're talking about the countable ones. So we're talking about the ones that you can count if you went ahead and tried to, especially the second line moves, first line and third line. So that's going to be a frame of reference for 2 important things, okay? So they're going to be useful for you anyway. You know, that ability to calculate points as well as to have a decent sense of the points is going to be a huge advantage all by itself. And it's going to pretty much affect, you know, like up to 100 or so moves of each of your games, if not more, which is a huge bonus. Because if you think about it, again, I said that this is the topic that is approachable for pretty much any Go level, you know, even like 15Q or so, or 20Q. Although, you know, around those levels, you like, especially 20Q, you probably want to work on your Go basics first. But so this is something that you can get to pretty much Dan level at without being anywhere near there yourself. It's also, you know, even if we just assume it affects 60 of your moves in a game, right? Where you play, you're a little bit, you have a little bit better sense of the points change than your opponent. That's going to be 60 moves where you gain more points than your opponent, right? 60 exchanges. So that's minimum 60-point gain if you think about it, because that's the minimum difference would be 1 point if you're doing better than them, right? So on the low end, it would be 60-point difference. So you can see that there's a huge gain. There's a huge bang for your buck in studying this stuff, because I don't think it would actually take you that long to study this stuff and get good enough that it would be fine to just move on and study something else. So I highly suggest you guys to go into a little bit of a training arc on this, because it wouldn't really take that long. And the rest of your Go games forever would benefit immensely. Okay. And like when you're good at this stuff, you also have insight in the opening stage as well. So it affects everything, kind of like how reading affects everything. And life and death affects everything. So back to the frame of reference thing. Not only do these moves give you a good frame of reference for other moves that are meant for geared for taking points. So any move on the board which you play purely for points, right? Which is not like attacking or defending or something, for your group safety or for some sort of purpose in the game. And it's just those many moments in a game where you just want points, right? You'll always be able to compare those moves to these moves that you like, because most of the moves in Go that we play, we don't really know, we're not really too sure how many points it's worth. But when you do have some moves that you are sure of, you can compare. And so let's say that you're looking at this 14-point move here, right? Any other move on the whole board that you're thinking of playing has to pass the test of, do I think that's bigger than this 14 points that I know for sure is 14 points, right? It's a really good, it's kind of like that that Go alternative game that you can play where maybe you set up cards with numbers on them or something, but basically you have the option to pass your turn and take points instead. And those points, you just, you know, they're not on the board, but they're kind of like extra comey kind of thing, right? So that's kind of what this is. It's like you could play this, some sort of stuff here or some kind of move somewhere, or you can take the thing that you know, right? And so that frame of reference is super useful. And I hope many of you will try that in your upcoming games, which is just like to just know a few moves of like at least have a gist, right? Of like the second line Hane and connect between two enemy territories. You know, the minimum, right? The minimum with like the worst, least valuable follow-ups is 6 points, which is 6 points, which is not nothing. And it only gets bigger from there, right? Depending on follow-ups. And so like the second line diagonals, and not to mention third line moves, right? Third line moves, of course, are even bigger. But once you go above the third line, like especially above the fourth line, you start to get into ambiguous value territory. So even though it might feel like you're comparing apples and oranges because you're comparing moves that are like in the center somewhere, or fighting moves, or kind of stuff of ambiguous value to stuff of sure value, it still helps you make a decision, because at the end of the day, you never want to put a move down that you don't feel confident that it's big, right? So, you know, any move you play, like I can jump into one of these random games that we're going to start looking at. Let me, in fact, why don't we even just segue into that, because I think it's a good moment. Yeah, it's perfect moment actually. So we're going to start with, let me see here. Right, so for this game, what was the... For this game, I've forgotten what the focus I wanted was, or which moves I was gonna look at. Give me a second here. I mean, there's this move, for example. So one of the reasons I picked these games was because also I could just stop almost anywhere. So like this P5, right? How big is this? What would you guys guess for the value of this P5? It doesn't seem needed for life and death or anything like that, right? So it's clearly just points. So the 15-point rule is I've told you how you can compare like non-points moves or ambiguous points moves to points move to sure points moves, right? So the whole point of the 15-point rule, first of all, 15 points is actually the size of some moves that start to look like endgame moves. For example, I showed you a 14-point move, right? That move is it's actually middle game if you think, if like at that size, it's really a middle game move, but it's kind of like starting up endgame. So basically, before endgame or like the late part of middle game, in general, every move you put down, you need to give it the 15-point check. Okay, every single move, even the non-points moves, because you have frames of reference to help you battle in your head between some random move and like the when and those are like the points moves are like your when in doubt moves, right? If you ever doubt something that you're gonna slap down on the board, just go and grab the big points moves instead. Like if you're thinking about playing P5, which it looks really small, like it's definitely worth less than 8 points. So if white ignores, then black can like push and Atari, but then like not much else, right? So compared to white 2, which would then allow white to block at 6, the difference in points is going to be maybe about 5. So it's around 5 points. Not very big. So if this is your game, right, and you're thinking of like, you know, this move pops into your head at all, or like anything around here really, you really need to stop and try to count it. And like, if you're not sure, you can just default to something that you know is big. Like this one is actually Sente, and this one is a 6-point difference, right? We talked about that. And then like this one is a 15-point move. It comes from that Joseki that we know. It's like this, right? For either player, this is a 15-point move. So yeah. So where were we? Was it this game? No, it's not this game. It's the top game. So already, if you had this kind of system and a little bit of this basic knowledge of the big moves, right? Then you would get 10 points by putting this one over there, right? 10 points. That's like almost the twice of Komi, right? So if you have one case of doing better on this per game, of like not this specific move, but like one case of using this strategy or of not playing this kind of small move by accident, even just one case per game, right? If it's this big of a difference, that's already like a whole rank stronger for you. Like that, if you're 11Q, that means you're 10Q now, right? Logically, because if it's affecting every single game by like 10 points or whatever, then however 10 points measures up to a stone of strength, right? But that's a huge buff to your go strength. Now let's find more examples. Let's keep clicking through. So black pushes here. Is this move big? First of all, can black get points out here? Second question is it Sente for white's life and death? There might be some scare for white, but even if white wants to respond, maybe bigger to play like this kind of move. Let's keep going. And if it weren't Sente, like let's say that white was already like this, then does white need to play here? Or maybe white can play like this kind of move, right? And then finish off. And then again, there's like this one sitting here. There's this one sitting here. The combined value of these two moves already passes 20 points. Do you see how important that is? I understand like some of you, like it doesn't look visually like there's a 20-point difference, but you have to trust it. Because it is. Because when black pushes at 7, there's going to be follow-ups as well. Oh, actually, let me correct myself. I'm sorry. I noticed just now that this stone is a little bit closer than the Joseki usually is. So it's usually here, right? So this one would be 15. It is a little bit smaller when the black stone's already saved. So the reason why this move, the reason why this move is 15 points is because black also has this follow-up of clamping here, which by itself is a 10-point move. So like if white ever saved it. Now you shouldn't just respond to this kind of thing right away, by the way, because this is a 15-point move, which means like if there's 15-point move here, there should be 15-point move somewhere else or something like 13, 14. Because this move is 10. It's smaller. Because obviously that white move is smaller than this white move, right? So you should definitely think twice before you respond in the same area to what your opponent just did. But this move is 10 points. Why is it 10 points? Because after this, later, white's going to get this one. Ba, ba, ba. And then, of course, black will get this one. Forcing. But here we can see that white has 7 and black has 9, right? So this variation is black plus 2. But if we have black playing first, and then black would have follow-ups like something like this, let's say, assuming no ko. And white would also have this follow-up. Then now when we count this, white's down to only 2. And black, previously was black plus 2. This time, black's going to be having 12 more than white. So it's 10, right? So 12 minus 2 is 10. Black's ahead of white in both scenarios, but one was black plus 2, one was black plus 12, including captures. Right? So it's 10, just like I said. So you need to just like understand and believe that these little edge things can be so big. So that's, yeah. You need to have faith in the system. Moves are always worth the same for both players. That's what makes this easy for you. Because the value of a move already takes into account both territories, the effect on both territories combined. Does that make sense? it's like if we look at this move, right? We're not just counting what black prevents white from reducing and what black gains, which is these three, well, assuming white's going to play at 2. Well, so if we go back to the example that we were looking at, which is, where is it? Here. It's 10 because we already looked at the effect of both territories, right? Like, for example, here, if we only count what black gains, then black saves these 2 points from white's reductions if white saved their 1 stone. And then there's also this point and these 2 points, right? So if we only looked at black, it would be 5. But if we look at white, it's another 5. So it's going to be 10, right? Like if we look at what white gets when white saves it, then compared to what we just saw, white has these 5 that are saved. Cost of the move? No, it's the value of the move. The cost of the move is... The cost of the move is depending on what that means. Cost of the move is like, what did you give to the opponent in order to get it? Or the cost... Whoops. Hold on, I need to tell someone that I'm teaching. I usually have my sound off, but today there's like some stuff I have to pay attention to. Okay, so sound is off. You do, yeah. So it's the 5 that are affected by white, and the 5 for white, and the 5 for black. So it's 10. So all the moves in Go. I'm getting really distracted here. Yeah, all moves in Go factor in the points for both players. So it's the combined value. So even if you're looking, imagine you're white and you're asking yourself, how big is this move for me? You still have to check how it affects black too and how it affects you. So when you tell yourself, okay, this move is 10 points for me, that means it's also 10 points for them. So it is you never look at only one side. So it's like that. And I showed some examples of where you count like the starting amount of territory and then you check the difference after, but you don't have to do all that actually. That's just a way of proving. But you only need to look at really the affected intersections, right? Which is going to be these 3 plus the 2 points here for black versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over here for white. But that requires visualization, right? So if you're doing it in a real game, you'd have to read ahead to see those follow-ups and all that, which does become very doable. But the nice thing is if you can memorize these values for the common, like for all the moves that come up in almost every game, you should memorize, understand it, but memorize it. That way you don't have to spend time in a real game. But hopefully we're all on the same page now about how big some of these moves are. And even though it looks visually small, it's super big. Yeah. So, and center moves, you just need to flip that. Okay. So moves in the center, especially the moves that are geared towards just taking points, they're like half the size that you think they are, or even less. Sometimes they're much smaller. And sometimes, often in the center, it's a place where only one player can make points. Whereas on the edges, it's often where both players can make points. So it's even further worse, basically. Okay. So let's go a little forward in this game. We're going to spend the rest of the time on game examples. So we found the super small move here, right? And I highly recommend you guys to actually go through your past games and try to apply the 15-point rule to find all your small moves. And even if your opponent responded to your move, it doesn't mean that your move wasn't small. It just means your opponent also played something small. So you need to find also the parts where your opponent shouldn't have responded. And so basically just find all the small moves, because if you play stronger players, they'll ignore the thing that should have been ignored, right? So you don't want to just be like a little bit, like we improve incrementally, but yeah, I mean, if you can notice that one of your moves isn't really Sente, for example, then you better correct that, right? But let's look for more. So let's see here. So even this move for black, right? Like not really needed. The only reason you need that is if you think that that this move is becoming a problem, but probably not, right? Because black could just keep going and then block, and then just go. Depends on your reading too, but yeah, like if you could, you would want to ignore this white move, but depends on what you read. Like this Hane, for example, looks pretty big because it breaks into all this. Okay, what else can we find? Like this white push is not very big because black just comes in, right? So where's the points? So, 15-point rule would be this one, right? This is not actually 15 points, but it's still pretty big. Like it's less valuable because black already has that stone saved, right? So it's gonna be less. So there are some bigger moves, but this one would be like a good, it's one of those good when in doubt moves. This one's really good because this one is actually threatening to connect with b8. And then there's also like this one, for example, or this one. And even this Hane, right? This Hane is super big. Like, let's investigate that. So let's say white Hane's here, right? And then black just kind of continues doing whatever. So how big was that? So there's going to be follow-up. I'm kind of oversimplifying, but let's just, let's just look at it like this. So now we see that black has around 4 points and white has, ignoring P19 type of stuff, white has 9, right? So white plus 5 in the way that we looked at it here. As long as we look at it the same next time, then it's fine. So then we look at black playing Hane, right? So black plays this first, and then white plays away, and then black gets this. So this move might not actually finish in Sente properly in this particular case, but even if we just look at it like this, that means white went from what was it before? It was 9 versus 4, right? This time it's going to be white 4 versus black 9. So it flipped, right? So it's a 5-point difference each way, which made it 10, right? So even this just random Hane move that we just pulled up, it's 10 points at least. It's actually more than 10 because first of all, there's other factors, right? That it makes it more complicated. Like black's overall eye space has gotten smaller. So for example, rather than Hane here, white would probably block here and threaten like f18 and just the overall safety. Yeah, and then if this move turns into a Sente move, that's a huge move to get in Sente, right? Because without that being Sente, black could be jumping in for a nice reduction in Sente, right? Or pushing in and then getting all these moves. Like even 12 by itself. So does somebody want to tell me how big 12 is? If we just, let's just assume that black is alive. So how big is this B19? This B19 was like just a follow-up of something we were talking about, right? It's just like, we're kind of glossing over it, right? But how big is it actually? It's not the biggest move on the board right now, I'll tell you that. But if we're just looking at it locally, like when black does get around to playing it. Because like the B10 area is bigger, for example. And Q19 and, But yeah, B19, how big do you guys think that is for either player to play? Remember, it's going to be the same value for both players. If it's N points for black, it's N points for white. 3 in Sente. Okay, does anyone have a different answer? Also, can you guys hear that background noise or no? Nice. Yeah, so the answer is 4 actually. So white's gonna go here locally, right? And we know that at the end of the game, white's gonna have to fill in at B17, right? So so white's gonna have to fill in here later. So compared to white playing first, which would be like here, this would have been 4 points, right? But instead it becomes 1. So that's a 3-point difference already. But also black is going to be affected because there's going to be later there can be this push. Even though we don't know if white's going to get this push, that push isn't even a possibility if black had played here first, right? Therefore, it's 4. And this is something you guys should memorize because this first line Hane in the corner to make white go there, that's almost every game it comes up, right? It's at least once every 3 games for probably all of us, or like, something super common like that. So you should memorize that because yeah, it's just 4, right? It's just 4. Now, of course, it's different though. Like obviously it's different if white stone was already saved with like something here, then it's not 4 anymore. It's different, right? Now, while we're just on that though, let me remind you guys that remember how I said that whenever you're connecting on the second line, you shouldn't be fancy and you should just connect solid, right? I think that question was asked originally by someone. Okay, I don't remember who asked actually, but in this case, we see that black A19 is neither really possible nor worth anything, right? So the reason why white plays A18 here to get the 1 extra point is because there's no downfall to doing it. That's why. Normally you shouldn't play this kind of like descend or tiger's mouth or anything without special reason. But here it's all gain and no con because like, yeah, there's nothing you give to black. Whereas like, let's say down here, let's say black is saving the Q2 stone, right? This move's very bad because now white plays R1 and gains all those corner points. But if you just connected, then you would be getting this move, which even forces white back to here, and you might get this move. So it's a huge points difference. Even just this exchange alone, right? That's a minimum of 2 points difference, even if you don't get S1. So it's a very bad habit to just keep descending all the time. Yeah. On the other hand, let's change it one more time. Let's say that black is isolated and something like this. In this scenario, connecting might be dangerous because your group might have some life and death troubles. Like here and then like here. So in that scenario, the hanging connection or the descend can be better. But that's because it's a special life and death circumstance, okay? So either life and death reason or the forcing move for white is 0 points, which here it isn't, okay? So that's otherwise you always connect, just always connect. Okay, now let's look through a few more of these games to finish up. So we've got this next game here. And we're gonna jump to, I think, move 64, if this is the game that I'm thinking of. Oh, this is not the game I'm thinking of. Let's do this one. I think this one's gonna be, oh no. Okay, never mind. Let's just go through and I'm just gonna forget about what I wrote down. So let's see here. In this game, the scenario we're going to look at, you see even this one, right? This is not right because black doesn't have a good enough reason to do this. And it lets white do this later based on ko. It even makes this cut work. So if black had just been normal like this, then this cut wouldn't have worked. Yeah, so black should Atari. and then just Hane. Okay, so here, how big do we think this move is in you have to give it some subjective value too. It's not just points, but also like effect on other things, right? So we're gonna have to come up with our own, you know, kind of guess numbers, which is a combination of the actual points you gain plus the effect on groups and the area and everything, right? So just throw out a number that you would grade this that you can compare to the, you know, 14-point move, etc. And you have to factor in what you give to white, right? You give white this one. So that's going to be the slight minus 2. So how big was black's move in Gote? Another good way of doing this is like rating moves out of 5 or something. 5 stars. But yeah, if that, you can do that if that helps you better. But yeah, do you think it's like small, very small, tiny, normal, you know, good, great? I think that's 6 stars, but okay. I guess tiny would be like 0 star. So black's already alive and connected, right? So going after 1 stone like that is pretty small. And then white played some other move. This actually also looks small if you think about it. This is like a very normal single digit Q thing where like thinking that this kind of area is big. But I've explained to you guys how it's not, right? Even though there's potential here too, it's still quite small compared to the, like, for example, invading here, or like even H2, you know, maybe not yet, but H2 soon, maybe still actually bigger than this. So, okay, let's go forward. See, like that move's big, right? And then here, right? Now it's one thing, it's all about intent, right? So it's one thing if black thinks that that black needs this eye space. And white probably should have Haned there, because the Hane is awkward for black to respond to. But this is not awkward for black to respond to. Here, if black blocks, white can Atari, right? So black has to go here, and then white can still bump. But if white bumps first, then now black is just perfect, right? That said, though, how big is this move really? Because we talked about how the center stuff is smaller than it looks, and it's also only points for black in this case, right? If white plays into it, it's not any points for white. You also need to consider that if white moves in, it's not as though white erases all the points with one move, right? There's still some points to be had. So this move's sort of okay, though, because black does need to be careful about eye space. But in terms of point value, though, like something like this is bigger. Second line. Okay. And what else? I jumped back to the first game. Okay, so white played Hane and Connect. Good. This move's quite small because the white groups involved are all alive. Like this is alive and this is pretty much alive, right? So this Connect wasn't needed because this, you know, so whenever white plays this move, right, they need to compare this move to like playing this edge move here, or this Hane here, or the double sente at B10, you know, that kind of stuff. This stuff here is tiny, right? This is like incomparably small. Stuff here is super small. This part's big. There's a D2 for white. So you see it's a second line. In a game like this where nobody has an easy time trying to make that center, you know, but even just in terms of size, it's a big pain for white to play this because this move's worth almost 0 points, right? But black can play more than 10 points with their next move. So this white move is a big mistake because black can actually take advantage of this kick shape. So that's looking pretty dangerous. So white needed to, I mean, this move is so important, this descend. It just does so many good things for white. Even this move, right? Like, how big is this really? If black plays nothing and white Ataris, like if black plays some other big move like here, and then white Ataris, okay, connect, and then white saved their stone. So how big of a points difference was that? So if black had responded, which should be here, but if we just look at this, this is like 3 points for black plus like up to 2 here, right? So it's like 5 points at most probably, which is less than half the size of some of those other moves. Okay. And like this white move, right? Like this white move is like 1 point, right? So it's really important that you guys go through your games and try to scrutinize in detail, because you can find a lot of those moves. And what I recommend as homework, if any of you guys want to take this on, this is homework I've given to some of my 1 or 2 of my private students, or just of you guys in general, which is go through some of your games with review and following the 15-point rule and looking for like tunnel vision and unnecessary fixes and small moves in general. See how many you can like click share on basically in your own game review, or like just how many you can find, and do that for a few games and then count it too. And you know, let's say you find like 60, right? Or you could even just limit your scope of like maybe between moves 50 to moves to move 150 or something, right? Or move 100 to move 200, right? But so you can limit your scope, but do that for the same for all the games and then count, right? Then noticing the patterns, right, of like what kind of moves you play that are super small and stuff. Try to play more games and see how low you can bring that number of small moves. So that's going to be a good training method. And just make sure in your real games you're actively applying the 15-point rule with the frame of reference idea. And of course, before that, you should study the endgame stuff, the move value classes. I'm still trying to find a name that encompasses endgame and move values and all that in one word, because endgame, the word endgame is too limiting because it's really not just endgame. But yeah. Okay, let's look at a couple more examples. So let's see. We have this game. So like here, right? White threatens 2 stones, but white's already alive. White should have Tenuki'd to play something else, like, for example, like approaching here, right? But white plays this descend, and this descend is not Sente, but black fixed it, right? But you have to wonder, like, why, like this group's fully alive, and B14 surely is not going to contribute to this group's well-being. So what's the point of saving those stones? So you see this kind of mistake, it's everywhere. Like when I review your games of you guys, and when I look at random OGS games to look for material, like they're like actually everywhere, these small moves. And this move is only worth what? Let's see. So if black plays first, black keeps like 3 points here. And if white takes it, then white has follow-up, possibly Atariing here. Although they shouldn't Atari until they've already done other stuff, because it makes black stronger. And also can be ignored if it's like if it's early in the game, you should also ignore, like you should keep ignoring white, like because this Atari is not even big either. But if it's later in the game, then the Atari might be big. But you know, even assuming the Atari happens, it's like 3 points that black lost plus white gained like this much, right? So 4, so 7, so about 10. It's about 10 points with like 0 influence and 0 effect on the groups. So 10 is actually bigger than I thought it would be, but it's still super small. Because like even the most uninspired move, like something like this or something like this, would be much bigger. Because you're also taking away moves that white could have had. You're also giving yourself influence and like potential for the future. Plus, we don't know if white's going to get this Atari actually, because it's not actually Sente. So realistically, this move is not actually 10. It's like it's maximum 10, right? So it's probably more like 7 or 8 points. Yeah. 7 or 8, I would say. Okay, let's keep looking. B14 feels like A14 will always be mode B15 anyways. If white plays B14, feels like A14, B15. Actually, the thing about that... Yeah, the thing about that is that there's a snapback here. So black has to be careful because if black plays A14, it's not actually Sente because white can respond here. Easy to miss though. So yeah, be careful. Here, this is going to come to the net profit thing, right? So black's invasion here is kind of not that reasonable. But white was too, I think, impatient about this. And as a result, white gets to capture back some of the territory, but black is able to cut white's stone off and actually develop something here. So you can see that black actually has gained quite a bit from this. And they didn't really give much to white because this was white's territory in the first place. Yeah. So, yeah. What white probably should have done is just push along first. And then wait, right? Because if black plays like this, then white gained those extra like wall stones in the center, and still white can play like this if they want to now to threaten this double Atari. So that's gonna be you have to look at what you get and what you give. And then let's see. Even this white move, right? Like this is a move that I would really wonder about because it's a place, it's an area where only white can make points, and it's not like black could come out here because there's a net. And even if there were a ladder, this black move is not a ladder breaker. Is there anything else for this game? Here's an example of the bad descent, right? Which should be here. And then, yeah, around here, there's some small moves, right? So black played this Hane to threaten 2 stones and surround a little bit here. But tell me, guys, what are some bigger moves? And white responds because I think white, you know, as usual, caring about stones, right? But stones, they're just small. They're not, you know. That's why in the Q levels, whenever stones are, you know, whenever stones are threatened, it gets a response, but it shouldn't. So what's a bigger move than this L15? I mean, L15 is not the worst thing in the world. L19. L19's okay. Yeah, there's bigger though. L19 is decent because if white does this, then also there's a follow-up for white, which would be like to get this 1 stone because of this. So it is bigger than it looks. A6. No, A6 is 2 points. A6 gets white 1 point and gets white a 1 point follow-up. So it's too small. S6. Yeah, S6 is big. S6 is going to be somewhere, I'm going to guess it's about 8 points. So it's going to go like this. Black doesn't have any follow-ups here, but black would stand to... So basically, white has at stake, like if white plays S5, then white's going to gain and sort of protect these points. And for black to play S6, black is going to gain and protect this many. So yeah, it's 8. You see, I instantly knew it was 8 because I know that that this move has a good chance of being 10, except when I factor in that white is too solid here for black to have any good follow-ups. Then I took away 2, so it was 8. Yeah, and you get used to it, and you get really good at guessing these numbers. And usually, even if you guess wrong, you're gonna be off by only probably 2 points. So yeah, this is an 8-point Hane. There's still at least one move that's pretty big if you guys can scan around and find it. There's one more. E9. No. E9 is kind of close to 0 because it doesn't, there's no, you can't really point to any points for it. Like what points does E9 get or reduce? It's worth around 1 point. It makes it harder for white to make you fill up F10. But that's about it. And it's not actually Sente because white has 2 ways to connect. There's one more move that is comparable or can sort of rival the S6 move. And I'll just show you guys, I guess. It's T17. Or I guess for black, T16. So it looks like you're just taking a stone, right? But these moves kind of started out as like second line Hanes, right? So it's kind of just finishing up that. And for black, there's going to be like this follow-up. And that move is going to be worth, let me see. It's not, I don't think it's as big as S6. It's going to be worth, so that's going to be 2. So, so 1, it involves a decimal as well, but let's forget about the decimal. So 1, 3, 5, 6. It's around 6. Yeah. It's a little bit more than 6. So S6 is a bit bigger. And actually, now that I sort of think about it, this move is bigger than I thought. Like I said earlier, though. So who said that one? It was Dr. No, who was that? One of you guys said this one, but yeah. Fed said this one. Yeah, so this one is, how big is this? This is protecting this point and these points, and then one more. So it is like if we assume that black would fix the J18 at the end, then for white it would be 4 points in Sente at that way. But also when black plays L19, we should assume that white ignores because like this black move here is much bigger than this white connect. Can you guys tell that? Like how big is it for white to connect here? It's a bit more than 2, but it's something not far from that. I mean, it is co, so it actually could end up being 2 or less actually, but it depends on okay, yeah, co is complicated. It's like you have to you have to look at the value of its follow-ups. It actually kind of cascades. Like it's actually a very this is very, very complicated to calculate because like black takes, right? And then black takes, and then black takes. But white can also take back. And like, so the follow-up, which is this, you give yourself half the value of this because it's not Sente, really. Like it's local Sente, but it's not really Sente. So it's not really global Sente. So, you know, you get this move only because you originally played L19. So you have to attribute some of its value to L19. However, we don't know if black gets this capture or white gets this because both players will Tanuki for the time. Like this move is much bigger. So after this move, white plays away and black also plays away. But then like to find the value of this capture, you also have to know the value of this capture, and you also have to know the value of this capture. So you actually have to like get this one and then cascade it back to this one and then to this one and then attribute it to this one. It's really complicated. So you just for those, you just give it a little guess and it's fine. Like 2 points, yeah, that's fine. And that's the kind of move where the value is really ambiguous and it's co. So your opponent could also start to take it back from you later. So if I were you, if you have like a move that is more sure value that is comparable to this, you should choose the sure one first. Now it's different, obviously, if white needs these eye spaces for life and death, right? But like if you really want to respond as white in this area, isn't it bigger to just take this move, which is big? Like this is already at least 6 points. So there's no way connecting here is going to be 6 points, right? Like, let's be real here, right? So that's why it's super, super important that after every single move gets put on the board, you can't just focus on the local situation. You need to look elsewhere. And, you know, when we keep playing in the same place, the moves tend to get smaller and smaller. Okay, and finally, let's look at, where is it? One more game, maybe? So, let me see here. We looked at this thing already. Okay, we looked at that, yeah. Maybe we're just good to go. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think we've done enough. So let's do just a quick little summary. Make sure you review some of the classes, or if you haven't seen them yet. So you can find them in the class content channel, especially under the endgame and move values section. So classes 16, 31, 25, and 35. Especially 16, 31, and 35. But you can check out 25, especially if you're like interested in monkey jumps. And you know, again, when you understand these move values and how it works, and even just have a few memorized, and you can make even just good guesses, it makes for an amazing frame of reference, not only for other moves that are meant to be taking points that you can compare to and judge against, but also the moves that are not meant for points. You can still evaluate those, not by comparing points, but by asking yourself, okay, I have this 15-point move. Like I have this move that I want to play, but how do I think it fares up to like this 10-point, this 15-point, this other move, you know, the 6-point double sente, let's say. Like that's almost like an emotional decision, but you basically need to tell yourself, yes, I'm willing to not grab these points to play this move, right? That's how you would do the comparison, you know. Whatever helps you, right? Imagine picking up 15 stones from your opponent's bowl and put them into your lid, you know, as prisoners, because that's what it's like whenever you pass up like a 15-point move, right? Like an actual 15-point move, which you can actually count. You're passing up a giant handful of prisoners, right? A huge one. So that's honestly the truth of how it works. So you need to appreciate the size of some of those moves. And, you know, you'll also get a huge leg up against all Q level players, almost all of them. You know, the the time and effort investment to make yourself way better at this is very low. So the value is very high. It's definitely low hanging fruit, and it'll serve you well for the rest of your Go career. So yeah, the 15-point rule basically is any move that's not like, as long as you're before endgame, in general, you want to try to hold your every single move you put down to a 15-point standard. So every single move you put down, you know, you're doing that instead of grabbing a giant handful of stones of captures. Okay. That's why, you know, it can be hard to spend so much time on each move when you're playing a real game, but make sure you do game reviews and just count and find how many small moves you have. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about this stuff, then just let me know, and you can post also in the study group, or you can DM me. And yeah, that is going to be the BenKyo's 15-point rule. So this class definitely goes hand in hand with the other classes that I mentioned. So make sure to view them all. Yep. Okay. See you guys later. Hope that was helpful, and have a nice day.